Welcome to the debate. So imagine for a second you are standing in the lantern room of a massive lighthouse.
Okay. A lighthouse.
Yeah, and you're surrounded by this thick, reinforced glass. Outside, a catastrophic hurricane is just tearing the ocean apart. We're talking monstrous, howling waves crashing against the jagged rocks below. It's this completely indifferent, totally destructive force of nature.
Right.
But inside, behind that thick pane of glass, you are perfectly safe. You're able to observe the terrifying majesty of the storm, study its patterns, and, actually experience this profound philosophical calmness in the face of sheer chaos.
Okay. But let's be honest about what that glass is actually doing.
Keeping you alive?
Well, yes, it keeps you safe, but it also keeps you completely alienated from the reality of the storm. I mean, you are observing life like a tourist.
A tourist?
Yeah. You're looking at a picture of a hurricane, but you're not actually participating in the raw, terrifying, beautiful force of nature. You're trapped in a cage of your own making, and you are basically calling it salvation.
And that exact tension is what we are exploring today. We're looking at the fundamental nature of art and human existence as presented in Friedrich Nietzsche's The Birth of Tragedy. Specifically, we're drawing from his preface to Richard Wagner and the opening sections.
Right, the foundational stuff.
Exactly. The text confronts what it calls the horrors and sublimities of existence. And the central question we really have to answer is, where does humanity's true salvation lie? Are we saved by the creation of beautiful, protective illusions, like that glass in the lighthouse, or does true living require the complete destruction of the individual self to achieve a raw, ecstatic unity with the nature outside?
Which is a question that emerges directly from Nietzsche's fundamental premise here. He explicitly frames art, not as some superficial diversion, not as entertainment you just consume on a weekend,
Right.
but as the absolute highest, most serious metaphysical necessity of life. Art is the very lens through which existence is justified.
Yes, exactly. And my position today is that the imposition of order, the construction of boundaries, and the strict maintenance of that protective illusion is the highest metaphysical achievement we are capable of. It is honestly the only thing that literally saves the human mind from madness.
While I'm arguing that true liberation and, authentic existence only occurs when those artificial boundaries are utterly shattered. You have to break the glass. You have to let the storm in to merge with that primordial reality.
Well, let me lay out the architecture of my perspective first. I believe that human salvation lies in what Nietzsche identifies as the Apollonian drive.
The sculpture god?
Exactly, Apollo. This is the drive toward the dream world, toward measured limitation, proportion, and the plastic arts like sculpture and architecture. To understand the stakes here, I want to lean on a metaphor from Arthur Schopenhauer that Nietzsche pulls directly into the text.
Ah, the famous rowboat.
The frail rowboat, yes. So Schopenhauer says that man is like a sailor sitting in a frail, tiny rowboat, trusting in his little craft amidst a howling, boundless sea of sorrow and chaos.
Which is a terrifying image.
It is, and that little boat is what the text calls the principium individuationis. It's the principle of individuality. It is the fundamental cognitive boundary that separates me from you and separates human consciousness from the terrifying, chaotic void of the universe.
Right.
Without the Apollonian power to shape reality into intelligible, beautiful, bounded forms, we would just simply drown in the terror of existence. Art is not a court jester used to distract us. It is the incredibly serious life-saving task of maintaining the hull of that boat. It's what allows us to experience life without descending into pathological insanity.
See, I look at that exact same boat, and I see something entirely different.
What do you see?
Well, the Apollonian boat you just described, it is a mask. It is a delusion. It's what ancient Eastern traditions refer to as the veil of Maya. It's an illusion that explicitly blinds us to the actual truth of existence.
Blinds us, it protects us.
No, it blinds us. The true metaphysical reality is not found in calm observation from a safe distance. It is found in the opposing force, the Dionysian state. This is the realm of intoxication, of immersive music, of profound ecstasy.
But that's just chaos.
It's salvation. Salvation requires the total collapse of that principium individuatis. It's only when that frail boat splinters and sinks that we finally overcome the alienating, as the text calls it, shameless fashion of society.
Shameless fashion.
Yes, by destroying the rigid boundaries of the self, we actually reconcile with nature and with each other. I mean, in the Dionysian state, a human being ceases to be a mere artist hiding behind a canvas. He's transformed into a work of art himself, sculpted by the immense primordial forces of the universe.
Okay, but marching with the storm isn't liberating. It's practically a death sentence for human consciousness. And Nietzsche explicitly warns us about this. This is where I think the Dionysian perspective becomes incredibly dangerous.
Dangerous how?
The text talks about the absolute necessity of a, quote, delicate line that a dream picture must not overstep. The Apollonian drive provides a measured limitation. If we lose that limitation, if the appearance becomes reality pure and simple, the text says it acts pathologically.
Pathologically? Look, I think you are misreading the intention of that line.
Not at all. Think about the actual mechanics of how we process trauma or horror. If you're watching a tragedy on a stage, the Apollonian boundary, the proscenium arch of the theater, the structure of the poetic meter, the literal stage lighting,
Sure.
all of that allows you to process the horror of the story. You know it is an appearance. That boundary protects you.
Right, you're safe in the audience.
Exactly. If that line is overstepped and you suddenly believe the murder happening on stage is reality pure and simple, your brain can't handle it. You lose your mind. You suffer actual psychological trauma.
Okay, but
Apollo's sun-like eye gives us freedom from the wilder emotions. Let me put it in modern terms. The Apollonian drive is like looking at a perfectly composed, highly curated photograph of a riot. It allows you to study the human condition safely. The Dionysian is throwing yourself into the center of a violent mosh pit. Without the riverbanks of logic and the principle of reason, doesn't the Dionysian flood simply destroy everything in its path rather than create anything meaningful?
It destroys the things that need to be destroyed. You are praising the riverbanks, but have you considered what happens to people who stay entirely safely behind them?
They survive?
The text is blistering on this point. Nietzsche actively critiques the so-called healthy, obtuse observers who stand safely on the shore and mock the Dionysian revelers. He says they look down with contempt or pity.
Well, yeah, they're watching people lose control.
But what word does he use to describe these supposedly healthy people who are so well protected by their logic? He calls them cadaverous. He calls them ghastly.
Wait, cadaverous? I think that's an incredibly harsh word for someone who's just trying to maintain their sanity and structure in a chaotic world.
Harsh, maybe, but it is the most precise word he could use. Think about the mechanism of being a cadaver. It means you have form, you have physical structure, but there is absolutely no life force animating you.
That's a leap.
Is it? If you spend your entire life behind that delicate line, completely insulated by logic, order, and social norms, you are practically a corpse. You are dead to the actual vitality of the world. The riverbanks you praise so highly are usually constructed of shameless affection, arbitrary class divisions, political borders, social conventions that keep humans isolated and paranoid.
That's a very cynical view of structure.
It's the text's view. Look at the historical examples provided. Nietzsche brings up the St. John's and St. Vitus dancers of the Middle Ages.
Right. The dancing manias?
Exactly. Whole villages of people dancing spontaneously until their feet bled, completely exhausted, seemingly out of their minds. The Apollonian observer looks at that and sees a disease. But Nietzsche says that when the cognitive forms of logic fail, these people don't die. They exhibit a glowing life. They experience a stupendous awe.
Awe through exhaustion and mania?
Yes, the flood doesn't drown them. It washes away the artificial barriers of necessity and caprice. It allows an authentic, raw human connection to emerge that is completely impossible when everyone is sitting alone in their frail little boats.
But you're treating those rules, that structure, like it's just an arbitrary lie designed to trap us. You frame the Apollonian dream as a mere deception, just a veil of Maya, to be ripped away. But the text argues the exact opposite. It argues that this dream world is a profound truth in itself.
Oh, come on. How can a beautifully constructed illusion possibly be a truth? By definition, an illusion is hiding reality.
Because it is a necessary mechanism for survival. And there is truth in how it allows us to navigate the world. Look at how the text references the character Hans Sachs from Wagner's opera, Die Meistersinger.
Okay, the poet.
Right. Sachs says that the poet's highest task is to unmask dreams, because dreams contain, quote, illusions, truths, thrice sealed.
Thrice sealed.
Exactly. Let us unpack that. The person of a philosophic turn knows that the everyday physical world is an appearance. It's a veil. But rather than recklessly tearing it down and inviting the chaos of the mosh pit, the artist acts as a close and willing observer of these dream pictures.
A passive observer.
A willing observer. In dreams, the text says, every man is a perfect artist. There is nothing indifferent, nothing superfluous in a dream. We feel an immediate apprehension of form. These aren't just lies, they are sooth dreams. We use these illusions to actively train for life.
Training for life? And that's your defense?
Yes, just as a physicist uses a highly simplified, abstract model to understand quantum mechanics because the raw data is simply too incomprehensible for the human brain, we use Apollonian art to process the sheer, terrifying scale of existence. We need the beautiful lie to survive the ugly truth. The Apollonian illusion isn't a coward's escape. It is a meticulously crafted, desperately constructed survival mechanism for the human soul.
I mean, I hear the elegance in that argument, but I just fundamentally do not buy it. A model of a thing is not the thing. Training for life is not the same as living it.
It is if the alternative is destruction.
The dream might contain truths, thrice sealed, as you quoted, but it is still fundamentally a sealed truth. The ultimate reality is the primordial unity, when the Dionysian state takes over, whether that is through the literal narcotic draft or the powerful, overwhelming approach of spring that penetrates all of nature with joy.
The approach of spring, right?
Yes, when that happens, the seals are broken. The text describes an evangel of cosmic harmony, and the mechanism here is crucial. In this state, a person is not just observing a dream to learn a lesson. He is fundamentally reconciled with his neighbor and with hostile nature. The earth proffers her gifts. This is not a simulation. This is the authentic, unmediated reality of existence.
Okay, but let's look very closely at what this authentic, unmediated reality actually entails on a practical level. Because if I am listening to this, I'm probably thinking, it sounds wonderfully poetic to merge with the cosmic harmony, but what does that actually look like?
It looks like true freedom.
Does it? The text explicitly states that in the Dionysian state, man forgets how to walk and speak. He is completely overtaken by the tremors of drunkenness. If we literally lose our cognitive forms, if we lose our language and our basic motor functions, aren't we just regressing to a preconscious animalistic state?
Regressing?
Yes. How can a total neurological shutdown be considered a higher community?
That reaction right there is exactly the kind of Apollonian prejudice the text is warning us against. You see, the loss of walking and speaking as a regression, as a breakdown of the machine. But the text frames it as a profound elevation.
Elevation? You can't speak.
Think about what language actually is. Language is a tool of division. To speak, you have to have a subject and an object. You have to say, I am here and the tree is over there. Language creates the boundary. When you lose language, you lose the ability to categorize and separate yourself from your environment.
So you lose yourself entirely.
The boundary dissolves. And that is how you merge into the cosmic harmony. Man isn't reduced to a stumbling animal. He is elevated to a god. He is about to take a dancing flight into the air.
But he completely loses his individual will. He has no agency left.
Because his individual will is the exact thing making him miserable. The image we need to use here is vital. Man is no longer the artist. He becomes the costliest marble and the noblest clay. He is physically being kneaded and cut by the heavy chisel strokes of a Dionysian world artist.
So he is stripped of his agency and becomes a passive object.
He becomes a masterpiece. He becomes a living, breathing expression of the universe itself. And regarding your worry about animalistic regression, that he's just acting like a beast, look at the specific animals invoked in the text.
The panthers and tigers.
Exactly. The panthers and tigers pass peacefully beneath Dionysus's yoke. This isn't a return to a bloody, survival of the fittest animal state. It is a divine, supernatural harmony where even the most violent beasts of prey are tamed by the sheer force of aesthetic unity. It is the absolute highest state of being because the alienation of the individual is finally cured.
Look, it is a beautiful, intoxicating image, I will grant you that. The tame tiger, the cosmic marble, but it is incredibly abstract. Let's bring this down to the literal ground Nietzsche was standing on when he wrote this, which brings us to the historical context of the text. To really understand why the Apollonian structure is necessary, we have to look at how we survived actual historical horrors.
Ah, you're talking about the Franco-Prussian War.
Exactly. Nietzsche explicitly frames this entire philosophy within that context. In his preface to Richard Wagner, he mentions he is collecting these thoughts amidst the horrors and sublimities of a war that had just broken out.
Right, while serving as a medical orderly.
Exactly. This isn't theoretical for him. It is a time of immense, bloody national trauma. The German problem, this cultural vortex at the center of Europe, requires a profound philosophical response. Some people at the time might have thought that art is just sportive delight or aesthetic revelry that should be put away during wartime because it's frivolous.
Which he rejects.
Totally rejects. Nietzsche insists that art is the highest task. And my argument is that to survive the earnestness of existence, the literal horrors of artillery fire, disease, societal collapse, and mass death, you desperately need Apollonian discipline.
To do what? Hide from it?
No, to process it without disintegrating, you need what he calls gallant earnestness. You need to create a structured, resilient society that can look directly into the abyss of mass death and still maintain its form. You need the Apollonian illusion just to find a reason to get out of bed in the morning after your world has been destroyed. The Dionysian impulse to simply dissolve your ego into the universe does not build a culture or a society that can withstand historical trauma. It is a surrender.
Well, I completely agree with you and with Nietzsche that art is the properly metaphysical activity of life. It is not a dispensable court jester. Where we fundamentally diverge is on the mechanism of how art achieves this salvation.
Okay.
You believe Apollonian discipline and state building saves us from the horrors of war, but the Dionysian perspective argues that Apollonian boundaries are the very things that cause the wars in the first place.
Wait, how so?
What is a war, structurally? It is the ultimate expression of the principium individuality's gone mad. It is the rigid boundary of a nation-state. It is the shameless fashion of politics and arbitrary borders. You say, we need boundaries to survive the trauma, but the Dionysian realization is that it is only by recognizing that individual suffering and individual separation is an illusion that we can truly transcend it.
Like telling people whose lives have been violently destroyed that their suffering is an illusion? That seems incredibly callous.
No, by showing them they are part of something eternal. The text refers to the Eleusinian mysteries, these ancient Greek secret rites where initiates would ingest substances and experience a collective revelation of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It wasn't about individual survival. It was about ego death.
Right.
And the text quotes Schiller's famous poem, The Ode to Joy. Do you bow in the dust, O millions? Do you feel the Creator, O world? When a society is completely fractured by war, when the earnestness of existence threatens to crush the human spirit, doubling down on Apollonian rules and political structures is entirely insufficient.
But it's practical.
Practical, maybe, but not a cure. The true, lasting response to mass trauma is the ecstatic Dionysian realization that we are all part of the same primordial unity. That is how you reconcile a fractured world. You don't build stronger riverbanks to hold the water back. You realize that we are all the water.
But if everyone is the water, if we completely surrender to that ego death, there is literally no civilization left to write the poetry. There's no one left to compose the music or even to consciously recognize the unity you were praising.
That's a fair point.
And the text itself actually acknowledges this tension. It states clearly that the continuous development of art is bound up with the duplicity of the Apollonian and the Dionysian. They are in perpetual conflict, only periodically reaching a miraculous reconciliation. But to me, the Apollonian must be the anchor. It provides the necessary beautiful illusion, that frail bark and the sun-like eye of Apollo, that allows us to navigate the stormy sea of existence without being immediately consumed by it. The ultimate takeaway for me is that we need the dream to make life possible and worth living.
And I maintain that as long as we cling exclusively to that frail bark, terrified of getting wet, we are hiding from the ultimate truth of what it means to be alive. The Dionysian spirit is entirely necessary because it shatters those safe illusions. It tears the veil of Maya so that we can experience raw, authentic primordial unity.
Even if it destroys us?
We must be willing to let go of our individuality, to lose our language and our precious categories, and to be kneaded like the noblest clay by the world artist. We shouldn't just observe art from behind a piece of glass. We must become a living work of art ourselves.
Well, it seems we have arrived at a point of deep convergence, even amidst our rather intense disagreement here. We both agree entirely with the source material's premise that art is not a superficial, sportive delight.
Right. It is not a readily dispensable court jester. Absolutely. We are completely united on that front. Art is the fundamental metaphysical activity of life. It is the only thing that justifies the suffering of existence.
Furthermore, we agree that it is the perpetual conflict and the rare, miraculous, periodic reconciliation between these two profound forces that drives human continuous development. The duplicity of art really is the engine of all culture.
Yes, it is. It is the relentless tension between the sculptor's careful, methodical chisel and the dancer's wild, unrestrained ecstasy that creates the profound complexity of the material we have discussed today. There is so much more to explore here regarding how societies and how we as individuals balance the desperate need for order with the terrifying pull of chaos.
Indeed. We will leave it to you to decide whether your own salvation lies in the beautiful, delicate boundaries you draw to protect yourself, or in the ecstatic, terrifying moments you choose to completely break them. Until next time, keep watching the storm from the safety of the lighthouse. Or, if you dare, shatter the glass and step outside into the rain.